So exercising that judgment is obviously it's a lot more than content creation. And you talked about that the role of the CMO is actually growing and how it infiltrates really the entire organization. And here's why this is important. I talk to a lot of CMOs. I talk to a lot of CMOs that have imposter syndrome, that don't feel like they have a seat at the table, that feel like they're as good as the last lead that they brought into the organization, that they're on top of one of the biggest cost centers in the organization. So therefore, they feel kind of like they're the CMO in the bubble, right? And we're the shortest tenure in the C-suite. So the CMO role needs purpose in a way that it has never had it before. And when we talked, I thought, oh my goodness, everybody's got to hear this. So you talked about how the CMO role has to influence things like systems and revenue and operations. And we've never talked that way before. So I would love to hear your vision, the CMO role and how it's changing.
Yeah. So you touched on something that's absolutely true and has a big frustration for every CMO is that being as good as the last lead you brought in or being seen as a cost center rather than a revenue generator, or even, in many companies, you don't have the systems, the ability to attribute the success that marketing has created. So I think that is big issue with our role because on one hand, marketing can and does influence revenue and create revenue quite directly. But at the same time, it does so much more than that, right? And some things that can quantify, so how do you quantify brand? I mean, there are some methodologies that people use, but realistically, when you have your CFO at the table, then he doesn't necessarily want to hear about brand equity and what that means. He wants to know how much money you're spending and how much money you're bringing in, right? So I think that's really, really key. And more than ever now, marketing is seen as a revenue generator function, and there is an expectation that you have to show ROI. So at Star, I run both marketing and new business development. So the BDR team is a part of the marketing organization, which it would have been an unusual combination a couple of years ago. But now, there's more and more teams that are structured this way. Because marketing does not stop at lead generation. At Star, marketing contributes between 30 and 60% of pipeline, of net new pipeline. And we track our contribution all the way down to revenue, right? So we know that attribution is really strict and we are showing that on a quarterly basis. That is the expectation of CMOs and of the marketing teams. Nobody cares about leads anymore, right? You need to show revenue. And so I think, when you said that CMO is becoming this orchestrator of systems, yes, 100%, because to be able to show that, you need to have influence on what is the technology that your company has, what systems do you have to be able to show that attribution all the way from the lead from your website down to revenue. You need to have good customer data. Again, that's a kind of a decision that is jointly owned with the CTO. You need to have oversight or good collaboration with revenue operations, with product experience, etc. Marketing is sitting in the center of all of these functions, and it's really exposed to all of them because if you don't have access or if you don't have influence over one of these areas, then you're not going to be able to create a true revenue generating function because you need all of these little pieces of puzzle to work together. And as I mentioned, revenue is a part of the story. It's a part of the bigger story, but one that you cannot always tell easily or people are not always interested to hear. But so I see it as, brand and pipeline being part of one story. It's not two separate issues. We need to weave them together and show how they are influencing what we do and helping the company grow from different angles. So I think, we need to reframe how we evaluate the CMO's effectiveness and not look at, as a CMO, not ask yourself the question, how can I get credit for the marketing contribution? But, rather, what is it that I can influence? how can I influence growth of this company? And some of this influence will come through, traditionally brand activities. Some of these influence will come through traditionally performance based activities. But so at Star, we always measure pipeline, we always measure revenue, but also since last year, we have started measuring influence. And that's, I'm still showing it alongside the other metrics to the board because I want them to get used to it and to understand what that means before that becoming the primary metric. But I'm really convinced that is the most important thing we can show. How does marketing influence rather than, only focusing on pipeline?